So, Ralph, I guess you don't need any introduction to your relatives, but this is yours.
First of all, they said I need the mic. I told them I didn't think I did because coming from a family of 12 kids, whoever was the loudest, that's who you heard. So we have to go on with a mic because they're taking a video, I guess, of the whole affair. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit about, besides John Golden, I think probably we're the only ones in Hyde Park that was before the Depression. That's going back. And during the Depression, there was nothing. The way you survived is off the land, basically. There was no credit cards. Mom and Dad, you couldn't ask them for $10. They didn't have it. There was we lived off the land, and we were a happy family. You wouldn't think that 12 people. I don't know if we ever had a problem, right? In the family, no, we never did. We all got along. We sat in the dining room at night. The older kids would help the other kids. Younger kids with their homework. My father would go down cellar and get sweet cider and green apples, and that was our refreshment. Okay? But anyway, there's a couple of things here. There was no electric on the South Cross Road until 1939. We had telephone before we had electric. And we had a kind of a funny telephone number, if you remember, 23F21. Well, I found out they built a little building in Statsburg on Hughes Avenue. It's still there, all right? And that building was an operator. And if you wanted to make a call, even you would have to call the operator. And the phone was with one of those big boxes on the wall with a cord on it. And you had to talk about this far from it, all right? And on the side was a little handle, okay? So if you wanted to call someone, you dial it with a big long ring, right? You got the operator. She said, number, please, and she connected with whoever, right? Well, we used to have a lot of fun, didn't we? Our number was 23F21, and there was 10 other people on our line. So we knew our ring, 21. 23 was the line, the two conductors, and 23F was that was a party line, and 21 was two shorts and a long run. Well, there was a CCC camp just down the road from us, and maybe some of you might remember that, but there are a lot of guys there, right? And there happened to be some girls on the South Cross Road. So we used to have a lot of fun because we happen to know what the girl's number was, right? So after we heard that number, we figured it was one of the guys were looking for a date. So we picked the phone up, you know. We listened to the whole conversation. So there was some bad things about that. But in the case of emergency, you picked the phone up, and you knew what was on it. You knew their voice, right? They were your neighbors, so you knew who they were. Say, listen, can I use the phone? I have to make a phone call. Sure, you know. So they'd hang up and you'd use the phone. But it was a lot of fun. And then finally in 39 we got electric, and then things changed a little bit. But I have to tell you some funny things about farming. First of all, we lived 100% off the farm. That's what we lived, off the farm. My father worked for Mills's. And I'm not sure to this date, but I think he was one of the people that helped build the Statsburg Reservoir, because the Millses is the ones that had built it. So he worked there, and I know how to. And then the day I was born, actually, March 15th, 1926, he went to work for Gerald Morgan, and Gerald Morgan had a mansion in Statsburg, And he also had one in Hyde Park that's now called Belvedere, right? It's called Belvedere, okay? And he was the person that took care of the flowers and the hedges and the driveways, and he made a feed plow for the snow, and he had 2 horses. And that's what he used to do. We used to pull the mower for the lawns. And he was pretty good at hedges and flowers and everything. He used to get $37 a week. That's not easy to feed, at that time, a half a dozen kids on $37 a week. So we lived off the land. And I remember he never really told us to do anything, did he? He really never told us anything. We'd be sitting at the table, and then he'd say, Emily, it's my mother, Emily, I was up to the potato patch, and those bugs, those beetles, are just killing our plants. That's all he said. The next night he came home, and the beetles were all gone. Us kids he never told us what to do, we just did it, right? I don't know if he really ever told us, you have to do this, you have to do that. He didn't have to tell us that. But anyway, it was funny the way we got rid of it. That was before insecticides and all this stuff today that you're not supposed to. We were brought up on organic food and didn't even know it. Well, the bugs were on the plants and eating them up. So my mother said, well, you go in the garage, and there's 3 or 4 pie plates down there I used to use, and they're kind of wore out now, and get some kerosene and go up there. So do you girls remember that? Probably not. No, maybe it wasn't. Okay, so we put half a cup of kerosene in a pie plate and put it by the plant, and we flipped the bug off into the kerosene, and we got rid of and that was why you survived. And most of what you couldn't do yourself, your neighbors helped you. I think that I was the 5th one. I think there were 7 of us born at home. I think it was. You were the first one? Okay. There used to be a lady down the road from us, Elsie Horn. She come up and took care of my mother before and after. And I remember like it was yesterday, at the second time she came, my father would go downstairs and he'd bring up a couple of bushels of potatoes, maybe a ham. That was her pay for being the midwife. That's what you did. And we butchered, usually around Thanksgiving. And my father was never able to, I didn't like it either, right? He was never able to stick he's never able to stick the pig or the cow, right? So Anthony Haynes would come up and do that. And no money, just he'd come up and help us butcher all day. And, but when Haynes needed the thrashing done for his oats, my father would go there along with Henry Kraft and Norman Kraft. Just about everybody on the road would come and help him thrash the oats, right? That's what we did, to help one another. And then it went on, and we had always run out of water. You remember, we had no electric, so we had no artesian well. So down near the pasture, there was a spring, about 6 feet deep, but that would go dry. That's what we used to use the water for, to feed stock, but that went dry. And there was a man-made a well 20 feet deep and probably 4 feet across. That was there. It's still there. You can go by the South Cross Road and stop in front of the driveway, and you can see that well. It's been there over 90 years. It's still there. Right? But it would go dry, so we needed water. So a couple of us kids, usually it was Irv and I, we'd hook up the horse. The horse was blind too, remember? We hooked up the blind horse to an old wagon, right? We put a couple barrels, 50-gallon barrels, onto the wagon, we get down to the creek by 9G. And at that time, there was actually a road through the creek where that bridge is on 9G in the South Crossroad. And we went down there and we would dip the water out of the creek into the barrels and take it home for the stock. Now we had a problem of fresh water, and my father was living or working down to Morgan's, so he would bring home fresh water sometime, a couple milk cans full of fresh water. And that's the way we got along for July and August. That way, and if we would run out of water, we used to take a gallon, it wasn't gallon jugs, it was metal jugs, down to Auntie Haynes's. And I think the well by Haynes's house, there across from the Roosevelt High School, I think that pump is still there. And we used to go down there and get the water for drinking water. And that's the way you kind of, like, you survived. And from almost the first thing, in the spring, my mother would start canning. She canned everything. She had the jars with the glass top on them, with a little rubber around them to keep the seal, and it had a wire snap that went over it. Well, in order to can it, the only thing was ever put in anything was just with the pickles. She used to put something in it, right? But she never put anything in. That's what I said. We don't even know what preservatives is because we never had them. And I remember my father made shells down in it wasn't a basement, it was a cellar, because we used that as a root cellar, right? And she had between 12 and 1,500 quart jars that she'd canned, right? On 5 shelves, 20 feet long. That's what we lived on. Hanging from the ceiling would be 5 or 6 hams. We used to hickory smoke the hams, put salt on them, and they could hang there like all winter. And they'd be all right. You just bring them up, wash the salt off. They were great. And over in the corner was a box with chicken wire around it, and that's where the potatoes were. And the potatoes saved in that cellar all winter until they started to sprout in the spring. And underneath a pile of leaves was carrots and beets, rutabagas, any kind of a hard surface thing. And those things would actually stay in those leaves in that cellar till almost spring. And some of the things, as kids, I remember we didn't like turnips, remember, and stuff like that, right? But that was interesting. And she had a copper container that she put on the back of the stove, and it was literally there all the time. And that's what she used to can in. She used to put like eight of those quart jars in there. And there's a wood stove, and she burnt the wood stove. You had to, every day, year-round. And sometimes it got pretty hot in there. She's trying to can or bacon. She'd done a little bit of baking. She made 12 loaves of bread every other day. So she used to make it, I remember, and she used to put it on the back of the stove and put towels over, and it would rise during the night. And the next day she would bake it. So there was some funny things like that. And the way we got the wood was, we got it from our farm, and we would have to saw in lengths that fit the stove. And she always liked apple wood. For some reason or other, she always liked apple wood. She said that kept the temperature in the oven more consistent. So she always had the apple wood. But anyway, my father had an old Model T Ford that he couldn't run on the road anymore. He had one that he took to work every day, but he had an old Model T Ford that he had jacked up. He took the fenders off the back of it and jacked it up to a buzzsaw. Now the tires on the Model T at that time was 30 by 2.5. That means they were 30 inches round. Today they're 16, so you can imagine how big it was. And that was the same size as the flywheel on the saw. So before we started, he would say, well, one of you boys, you want to go down to Strevers and get a gallon of gasoline? Well, we all wanted to do that because he gave us a quarter. That meant, with that quarter, 17 cents was a gallon of gas, and we had 6 or 8 cents to buy candy. You could buy a lot of candy back then for 6 cents. Yeah, your whole bag full for 6 cents, right? 1 penny, you get 15, 20. Well, anyway, we come back with the gasoline. He put in a gallon of gas, and we put it on the back of the house. Remember the old about there's old things there, and he started her up and get her going. So he would feed it into the saw, and one of us boys would take it out of the saw and throw it down into the cellar, right? So I remember one time Irv and I was working on it, and Irv says, is this damn thing ever going to run out of gas? I don't know, Irv, I only put a gallon in it, so it seems like But anyway, that's what we did for cooking. And the heat was one of those old, those great big grates was in the floor with a great big dome in it, which you look down there. And the smaller kids, that's where they used to get dressed, on top of sometimes it wasn't too pleasant, because the little ones, one of the little ones would stand there, and this dome down there is red hot. And they used to figure it was too far out to the bathroom. And when that hit that dome, everybody got off for a few minutes. And once in a while there was a laugh like that, you know. And he always had us out there in the spring in the dandelions. Just as soon as the dandelions come out, us kids would go out there and snap them off, right? He made wine out of them, of course, right? And the blueberries, he made wine out of the blueberries, right? And that was a problem because there was always a black snake or two. Yeah, on the blueberry vines. They lay right on top of the blueberry vines, right? But anyway, we got through that. And he always had a jug of, he kept all this wine and stuff and cider because at that time, the only entertainment that people had, they went to one another's houses and played pinochle. You know, and that's what they did. So we always had a drink for him, right? So it was time to take the apples. This was before sprays now and things. When you took an apple off the tree, you took a bite out of it and you looked at it. You didn't know which half of the worm you got sometimes. So when we went to take the apples to the cider mill, the cider mill at that time, I don't think there's any evidence now, where Horns Park is on East Road. Do you remember that? The cider mill that was there? Yeah? We went to Horns Park. There's a cider mill there. So we used to take down, I don't know what we used to get the apples, but he would inspect it to make sure there was no holes in the apples. Because if there was a hole in the apple, there was a worm in it. And when you take it down to the cider mill, he wouldn't take it. So he used to take like 10 bushels of apples, and then he would get like 10 gallons of cider. No money, just that's what he did. He'd probably get 20 gallons or 30 gallons of cider out of the apples, but he'd give you 10 gallons. And that's how he got the hard cider. He put it downstairs, and there was a hole in the top of it there. And he used to put in sugar, a piece of meat, roast beef. Yeah, that gave a good flavor. A piece of roast beef and put something. So you used to boil. You used to boil for 2 months. The foam would be all over the place, right? But, yeah, I forget what it was now. And, well, we had and I know they used to go for entertainments on Saturday night, they would go to George Acker's place, by Kitters's, and some of his friends out in Schultzville. They didn't go too far because that was before antifreeze for your car. And he put, once in a while, he put alcohol in it, but alcohol boiled and you had water. So we found out it worked real good, but it was kerosene. So he used to put kerosene in the radiator. Actually, it works. Kerosene was all right. But the funny part of it was, if we wanted to go somewhere in the wintertime, he would have water on the back of the stove, right? Hot water, get hot water. And just when everybody got ready, he'd go out and put the hot water in the radiator and start the old car up. I think at that time it was an old straight 8 Buick, 1939 straight 8 Buick. But when then we'd take off. No heat in the car, so everybody had a blanket. So when you get to the place, he's going about a mile down the road before to get there, he'd get out, and he'd open up the petcock in the radiator and let the water out. Then when I got ready to come home, the hoop, whichever house it was, he would do the same thing, and that's the way you survived with it. And of course that would freeze, so he used to put cardboard over the front of it so the water wouldn't freeze on it. And this is kind of the things, and my mother used to make a cake. That's what they used to do. And they'd sit there and play pinochle all night. Half a dozen kids sitting around. We used to play checkers and bingo and all that stuff there. And once in a while, if we were pretty good kids, they never promised us anything. Never promises anything unless they kept it. And I still do that today. Don't ever, kids, if you don't do your homework, you're not going to the theater tomorrow. If they don't do their homework, you don't take them to the theater. Right? So he'd say, well, you kids have been okay, you done this or done that. We'll go down to the Rialto. That was a little theater down in Poughkeepsie. So he says, we got to get down there before 6 o'clock. Because before 6 o'clock, it was 17 cents. And after 6, it was 25 cents. So we always got there by 6 o'clock. But it was good because your ticket included at halftime between the eyes of the world. Between the eyes of the world moves and Tom Mix or Dick Tracy or whatever it was at the time on, right? They used to give you a dish. Today those dishes are worth all kinds of money at an antique place. Some of them were green, pink, yellow. I think that's do you have some of those? Yeah, they're worth money today. They gave it to you, the Rialto, for the 17 cents and 3 hours of entertainment. Yeah. So that's how we kind of got along. And there used to be a mill, a feed mill in East Park on Mill Road. On the right-hand side, there's the creek there, and there's a mill there, Dickerson Mill, right? And we used to take the horse. Most of the time you took the horse because it didn't use gas. And not only that, and the horse was blind. I don't really how it done what it did. But anyway, we used to go down there, and you used to get about once a month, get the feed for the cows and the horse and the chickens and all the other animals. And there was one thing that we particularly liked was the hog middlings, they called it. They come in a white bag, a cotton white bag with black print on it. And they my mother, along with everybody else, used to bring those bags home and put them in the water and boil them. And if they boiled them long enough, all of that black color print came out of it. Then they used to put a hem in it, and they used those feed bags for almost everything. You know, they could use them for aprons. They made aprons out of them. They made all kinds of dust cloths out of them and everything. So that's most of all, the only place we ever went to get groceries was the Great Bull Market. That was the only market, was the Great Bull Market in Smith Street by the railroad tracks. And I remember like it was yesterday, we went down to shopping there, and the only thing she bought was 25 pounds of flour, 25 pounds of sugar, everything she bought in bulk, right? So I remember one time, and she says, Henry, she said, look at the groceries. I know we was out there, the table's full, and the table was big enough for 10 people, so it was a pretty big table, right? She said, and do you know what this cost, Henry? This cost $25. And she must have had 15 bags. Now you get $15 in one bag. So that was, and she had all her own baking, all her own cooking and everything. The girls helped, just as the boys helped. But we had one thing, we weren't rich, but by no means were we poor. We had something that families don't have today. We had love. I don't know, I don't remember to this day that I ever remember us kids fighting. We didn't, we got along, because we loved everybody, still do. How many is there left now? Is there 5 left? 6 left? All right, so we, and you remember the Metropolitan Insurance man? Herb Harris or something? He'd come around every week. Each one of us had an insurance policy on us. Plenty of money to bury you. It was $1,000. I mean, you got buried in for $300-400. We all had $1,000. As we were born, we get $1,000, right? Insurance, right? He used to come around to the house and collect a quarter for each one of us. The insurance agent come to your house to collect. And he hit every house, I guess, on the road, because they all had Metropolitan Insurance, right? And those were the things that saved you the gas, right? And then it came, after some of those things, it came the war. And overnight, December the 7th, 1941, everything changed, everything. Rationing changed. The women were down at the firehouse in Staatsburg making gloves, making hats, many things. I still have in my book that I'm putting together some of the stamps. It was originally 10 gallons of gas a week, and they cut it down to 8. It used to be 1 pound of sugar a month, 2 pounds of meat. Do you remember any of those, what they were, John, the value of it? They had a... I
remember the stamps.
Yeah, I still have them. I still have some. Yeah, each one of us, see, each one of us, we made out all right. If you were a family of 2, I mean, you get a pound of sugar a month, right? 12, you get 12 pounds a month. They thought they were kidding us, right? Each one of us, no matter, even if you're a day old, you got a book, right? Anyway, I went to school, of course, at Staatsburg, and it was built in 1931. No, excuse me, 1930. And I was eligible. I was 5, and I could have went to kindergarten, but it was held up for a year. And it was held up because they didn't have the toilet and the sink yet for the kindergarten. And I understand that when the state bought that, they left that sink and toilet in there in that little room. I don't know. I haven't been back. But I'm going there for the Thanksgiving dinner. I'm going to ask and see if I can go up there. Anyway, I went to school and went through, and I was pretty active in school. But there was, at that time when I got to be 16, I had a car. Bought a car for $35 from a guy up in Pleasant Valley. 1936 Plymouth, $35. At that time, you could get licensed at 15 because there was nobody around. So I could get licensed, right? But you weren't allowed to drive that car any place for any entertainment reasons. Only back and forth to school, back and forth to work, something like that. So I remember I used to get 2, 3 of the girls on a Friday night. I shouldn't say 2 or 3. It was 5. You get 3 in the back and 3 in the front back then, right? So we headed for a skate land up in Arlington, right? I dropped them off about 4 blocks, right? And I said, don't walk down the sidewalk towards the dance, because there might be somebody watching you. And I leave, so they would go around the block a couple times, and they finally end up there. So I had to find a place for my car, or otherwise I'd have lost my license, right? So I was parked 6 blocks away from the place and walked into it because you wasn't allowed to use your car for recreational purposes. So, but anyway, that was the thing we'd done almost every Friday or Saturday night. And one night, at that time you couldn't buy tires. You couldn't buy batteries. The only thing you got, you could take, when I did, many a nights, I'd have a $5 bill. I asked Anthony, I was working at Haynes's, and I asked him if he'd pay me Friday night instead of Saturday night because I wanted $5, all right? You could take 5 people to a dance for $5 for the entrance, a hot dog, a soda, and a piece of cake. And it only cost you $5. So I was a big shot. I had a car, took the girls all to dance, you know. Because you couldn't buy tires, you were running on blowout patches. A blowout patch is like a silver, like a big spoon turned upside down. You put that in between the tube and the tire. So I was coming back and down by I had the first flat tire coming up 9G. By the school down there, 9G. I got out, you jack it up, you take the lugs off, you take the tube out, put the tube across your knee, scratch it off, put the glue on it, new patch, put it back to the tire, pump it up, and you're on the road. But that just happened once this night. Happened 3 times. I had to be at work at 4:30. And we left at 1 o'clock, and I already had 3 flat tires. I don't know what the mothers and fathers thought when I brought their daughters home at 4:30 in the morning, right? But well, they were still ready to go. The next Friday night, so apparently it didn't make much difference. Okay? So, thank you. And then it come graduation time. And March the 15th, I was 18. And the 29th of May, I was inducted after going to Albany for the physical and everything. I was inducted. And I went into service 3 weeks before I graduated. And for the whole 75 years of my life, I said to myself, why couldn't they just give me a month and let me graduate my class? But some of you people right in this room may have been in the 2001 Roosevelt High School graduated. I graduated in 2001 from Roosevelt High School with a certified diploma. Not a makeup one, the same one. 3 standing ovations from the graduates. Yeah. My family was on the stage. And the superintendent of schools presented me with my diploma. And he says, I'm not sure, but this might be the first senior ever at Roosevelt High School. Because that was 57 years. And I said to the body there, I had made a little speech. I said to the body, I says, I know 12 years is a long time for you kids to get this diploma. But I waited 57 years, and I just so that's not so bad, 12 years, right? So anyway, I wasn't allowed. So I went to, I had done my basic, and when I left Fort Bragg, North Carolina, I went to Fort Meade, Maryland. That was a POE, Port of Embarkation. Now, it was just exactly, the Battle of Bulge started on the 16th of December, and that was the same weekend that I went home. They allowed you to go home. We don't know how many weekends, but we used to catch a train from Baltimore, Maryland, go up to Pennsylvania Station, and there would be 50 taxis waiting there, picking up nobody. And taxis would not let anybody get in except military. They would take us through the city from Pennsylvania to Grand Central. God knows how fast. Load the car up, 6, 7 of us. Sometimes they wouldn't even take any money. So we'd get on and I'd go up to Statsburg, right? Go off Statsburg, and that would be a Friday night. You had a pass from Friday night at 5 until Monday morning at 5. So I went and visited my family for 2 weekends. And the third weekend, coming back, there wasn't a stop at Baltimore on the train we was on. But the conductor disappeared when we got to Baltimore, and the engineer, what was going on? So there must have been 200 guys waiting at the door, and the train never did stop. It got down to about 5 miles an hour, and a couple hundred guys jumped out because the train was not allowed to stop at Baltimore. Right? At the time, after Pearl Harbor, every single thing was war effort. Every breath. I used to ride my bicycle from the South Cross Road over to that little place is on top of Mulford. What's the name of that deli up there on top of the hill? Hilltop. Okay, there was a little 4x4 shack they built there. Had one window in it, and the window overlooked the Hudson River. And the guys, the high school guys, they would have a shift, we'll say from 8 at night to midnight. I was one of them. And we got there, the only thing was there was a little one-burner kerosene stove and a Coleman lantern and a telephone. If we saw any activity at all, as we looked out over the Hudson, no matter what it was, we picked the phone up, and Roosevelt's home answered. The MPs answered it. And that's the way he protected his home, right? And I'd get home at 1 o'clock. At 4:30, I'd be up. When I was in school and I had my license, and I was going to dances, I had to have some money from someplace, so I worked at Anthony Haynes. I went to work there. From where I lived, it was about a half mile. And our group went 4:30 in the morning until 7:30. And I came home and got cleaned up. And the thing that I hated the most, to this day, I hate a farm for a silly reason. I had to go home and milk those 10 cows by hand when I should have been sitting at the bus. When I was sitting at the bus, watching John Golden and other guys out there in the field playing football and playing baseball, and I had to go home and milk the damn cows. Huh? Wouldn't that make you? Oh, I like cows, all right. Yeah, but about 3/4 inch thick and well done. That's the way. So anyway, I got 50 cents in the morning for 3 hours, and I got 50 cents at night. So for the 6 days. So you get $6, right? But on Saturday from 4:30 in the morning to 7:30 at night, you used to get $4. But $10 went a long ways because gas was 20 cents. But I've made several speeches around to schools, West Point, Vassar College, and I always bring this when I hear the young people complaining. When I delivered mail for 10 years out of Statsburg, I hung up gas at a little gas station on 9G, just above Wagner and Eddie's, where Charlie Hayes had a little gas station there, one pump. And then I would go to Pleasant Plains, to Badenfeld's, and get gas. And each place I'd hang up $2 worth of gas, because that's all they would give me, is credit for $2. Then I would go to Schultzville, another one, and Amy Rackett and Clinton Corners. Well, I owed these people, and I was only getting $63 for 2 weeks. at the time. And I was driving my car 60 miles a day to deliver mail. Anyway, when I see these young people, I said, things ain't so bad today. As I remember, when gas was 20 cents a gallon, you got a dollar's worth. You didn't have the dollar. You had no way of getting it. Today you pull your best fancy car up and you get $60 worth of gas and you pay for it. So times must not be that bad. I don't care how you get the $60 today, but at least you can get it. Back then you couldn't get it. So it was pretty important that people realize that. And there's nothing I'd like to do more. I don't mean this for people here tonight, but I mean it. I love to go to middle schools. I've done a presentation at Vassar College. I've done 2 of them at West Point. I've done 1 or 2 of them at Stewart Air Force Base. I love to talk to young people because you want to realize those young people is why I was in the Battle of Bulge. And I never could figure out until recently that Mike and I was at a scholarship dinner why they didn't let me graduate my class. And when I went overseas from Boston Harbor, it was Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve, 1944. We got on the ship. 6,100 replacements. We knew where we were going. We were going to the Battle of Bulge. And the reason we were going is to replace the ones that were killed. We were alone. We weren't with any unit or anything. Why couldn't they wait till the next day? Or a week or 2 after? Let us spend Christmas. But then I realized that Mike and I was at a table, and it hit me. And there was this, was she a sophomore or junior in school? The girl, remember? For the scholarship. Or it's a senior. There was this nice-looking girl, well-groomed, well-spoken and everything, sitting across the table from us with her father. And I looked at her and I says, all of a sudden, now I know why I didn't graduate my class. And now I know why I got on the boat to come over here, 6,000 guys on Christmas Eve. It's because if we didn't do that, some kids wouldn't be speaking English today. Probably none of you in this room probably would be speaking English. I was in the Battle of Bulge. I was winning patents for the 7th and the 3rd. And I got awards from the ambassador. I had to go down to Washington, D.C. after, about 10 years ago. Our unit had blown up some bridges in Stuttgart. And because I was in the heavy artillery, that's what we did, knock out bridges, railroad yards, ammunition dumps. And at that point, I got to realize that that's what it was all about. It was more important for me being in basic training for those 3 weeks than it was to graduate, which actually it was. And I have a little bit of a confession too. Because I was working on a farm, I could have got a deferment. I didn't want it, but I never told anybody. Norman Kraft's father was on the draft board at the time, and really good friends. And he had me to take, and he got me a deferment. I never told my mother and father or anybody else that I was happy that I got a deferment. Because even as bad as it was during the war, it wasn't as bad as a damn farm. Whew. So I was happy and the only thing, in order for him, he only had 27 cows. And he had 3 people working for him. In order for that deferment to hold, he had to buy 3 more cows, and he didn't get them in time. So I was back to 1A. But I just want to tell you about the Statsburg School. We had a great bunch of teachers there, and the teachers were all they weren't allowed to be married. They were all single. And they devoted their entire life at teaching school. Some of those teachers are 20 or 30 years. They were, and I can't help to tell you this, because I was on the school board in Strasbourg, and we were mandated by the state of New York to annex with Rhinebeck, or Hyde Park. And there was 5 board members, and Lauren Kipp and myself wanted no part of going to any other school district. But the other 3 members override us. All right? So we did go to Hyde Park. And the reason Rhinebeck, the state said that we needed to go to another district because we wasn't giving the kids proper education. The first 2 years, the Strasbourg kids went to Roosevelt. Who do you think was the valedictorian and salutatorian? From Strasbourg. Does that tell you anything? That's how the state can be wrong. But we give in to them. But there's 2 school districts in the county that didn't. And I admire them. One's Spackenkill, they're still union free, and the other's Dover Plains. We should have kept Strasbourg. And they're just as good. Education. And now, when they were building Roosevelt, John went to Strasbourg, right? Well, 1 or 2 years? 3 years? Yeah. Now the school was built for 300, and it was over 600 there when Roosevelt came up, right? But what a basketball team they had, football team, beat everybody around them, right? Well, I don't know if there's any other thing except one thing that was kind of nice. Used to be a bus line that went from Red Hook to Poughkeepsie. I think it was a Twilight bus line. And each Wednesday, we done our banking. The school in Strasbourg done our banking. They had little envelopes, and they put 10 cents in or a quarter, and give it to the bus driver, remember? And the bus driver would take it down to the Poughkeepsie Savings Bank, and the next day he'd bring back all the receipts. Then when the war started, we didn't have that savings account anymore. We used to save it for bonds. And it used to take sometimes 3-4 months to get $18.75 for a $25 war bond. But those are the things that you remember best. And I understand that they're going to have if you people got to know this or not, but they're going to have a Thanksgiving dinner at the Strasbourg School. I think it's, does anybody know when the date is? 24th? It's free. It's free. And you should go. Okay, I'm going to cut it short. I think my time is up here. I've enjoyed talking to you, everybody, and thank you very much. Oh, it's the 19th at the Strasbourg School. Free Thanksgiving.
Some of you must have some questions. Oh, I got one over here.
Okay, growing up on a farm over in the Finger Lakes area, I'm familiar with a lot of your situation. I didn't hear you mention anything about using soapstones for heat, and I wondered what you used for heat. Did you burn wood, coal, or whatever? And also, you mentioned about ham and maybe bacon. Did you have a smokehouse where you smoked the meat?
We made the hams, you mean?
Yeah.
We made the hams. My father had just hold this. My father, he had made a building. don't know, I should tell you this or not, but it used to be an outhouse, so we built it. We went from a one-hole to a two-hole. So that's what we used for a smokehouse. Of course, he took the holes out and all the other stuff went with it, you know, and fumigated it pretty good. But he used to hang the hams into that smokehouse, and it would take sometimes a couple of weeks, and day and night he would keep that fire going. But those hams lasted all winter long. Yeah.
And what about soapstones? Did you ever use those for heat in the beds?
No. That's something we should have tried. But we lived off the land. We literally lived off the land.
Ralph, I totally concur with you about dairy farming.
It wasn't easy getting up 2 o'clock in the morning with a lantern and going out in 2 foot of snow. Thank you.
Okay, I think we can give Ralph a rest now, and I want to thank him a lot. We've got a card and a gift for him from the Historical Society, and it's not going to be enough to pay him for the information we've got. And it's all being recorded in the back. We're going to give Ralph a CD or a DVD. Which is it going to be? DVD.
Can I say a word about the Fowler Project?
Yeah, you can.
I'm kind of the treasurer for the Fowler Project. And Fowler, of course, is what President Roosevelt's dog. And the project is what we do, as she said, explain later. But in the last few years, it's cost American Legion $400 to send the cookies to Florida. Last year we got some donations, but there was over 300 dozen cookies that sent, all beautifully wrapped, and Mike and I had packed them, took them to the post office. And this year, I'm wondering if any of you belong to an organization that might be able to send us a few bucks. We'd appreciate it. Now, it's not a Hyde Park thing, this Project Fowler. It was accepted by Dutchess County 12 years ago or whatever, and it's a Dutchess County project, but Hyde Park kind of took it, they're responsible for it to get down there. Now, I understand from recently, this is something maybe the Roosevelt is not at Newport, Jacksonville right now. It's in Georgia. They're getting some new equipment and new things on it, all right? So if anybody belongs to an organization or know an organization can send me a few bucks to help. It's usually $400, and I got $150 so far. And we hope we get more. But it's up to the Legion, and we don't have a lot of money in the Legion.
Ralph, what address would they send it to?
Oh.
What address?
Excuse me?
How would they get the check to you?
Well, actually, I'm on 3 Pinewoods Road, if you want to send it. To 3 Pinewood Road, Hyde Park. 3 Pinewoods. Hyde Park. You make it out to, you can make it out to the Fowler Project, American Legion Fowler Project. I would really appreciate it.
Ralph, why don't you explain that the post office, the only only organization that can send the cookies to the neighbor.
Okay, we found this out a few years ago. I went to FedEx, and I went to a shipping place, and I went to UPS to get prices on 250 pounds of cookies. And the post office department was not the cheapest. In fact, it was the most expensive. But the FedEx and UPS are not allowed on the port. The post office is. So if you're shipping anything to any place that might be a military base or something, you have to send it through the post office and not through FedEx or UPS, because they won't let the FedEx and UPS on the docks. All right. But maybe you remember the big Fleet Week we had here a few years ago, when we had 60 of the sailors to come up from Jacksonville, and they had a big parade here for them, a big dinner for them. And at that time, Dutchess County, but the county don't support sending the cookies down there. They should give us something, but they don't, because it's a county thing. So if you know anybody in the county, maybe hit them up, maybe maybe get $50 out of them. All right?
Well, this will be a starter. It's $50 from the Historical Society.
I'm going to give this to Fowler. All right? Yeah. I'm going to donate that to Fowler project. All right? That's okay with you?
What?
That's okay with you, right? All right.
I guess we can't stop Ralph. All right, so I guess we could...
Question.
What?
Is this to Ralph for tonight, or is this towards the postage for the others? Which I
Well-
didn't understand what you...
Well, we intended the $50 to be for Ralph, for his efforts, and you can see he's put some effort into this. But if he wants to give it to Fallow, that's fine
I
too.
do.
You did.
Yeah.
Okay.